Welcome to Chapter 8. We're back to the idea of adverbials, but now our focus is more on how do we choose the best ones for a particular sentence, paragraph, or book. What's our advanced grammar definition of an adverb? They're words that modify verbs. Because of this very general definition, a lot of different members of the form classes and the structure classes easily can apply, as hopefully you realized from your reading in Chapter 8. Adverbs provide information about where, when, how, and why, versus adjectives that tend to tell you who or what. A lot of the time it's hard to tell the difference between an adverb and an adjective in a sentence, but we can always move adverbs around and everything still makes sense and works grammatically. Quickly he sat, he quickly sat, he sat quickly. And depending on your audience, as well as what comes before or after this sentence, you might choose to put your adverb at the beginning, the middle, or the end. Opening adverbials can help offer cohesion. You've studied cohesion in Chapter 5 of our textbook, where it talked about all those good things like transitions and the known-new contract and strategic repetition. Here's a selection from Toni Morrison's novel Beloved, and I've strategically highlighted particular adverbials. As you look at each of these phrases, what information do they give you? Are they telling you when, where, why, how? We've got a lot of where mixed with some when. When, where, in the heat of every Saturday afternoon, she sat where? In the clearing, while the people waited where? Among the trees. The base sentence here really is she sat, pattern 4. Everything else is extra information, not grammatically, because the sentence works as she sat, but rhetorically, we sort of want to know where, when, and why she sat. After situating herself, when, where? On a huge flat-sided rock. And then we get some more where and when. What all of these phrases share is that they're prepositional phrases. They are probably the most common adverbial because we often want to tell readers when, where, why, and how. It's just polite. But as our book says on page 152, prepositional phrases tell us what direction, place, time, duration, how long something occurs, the manner in which it occurs, or the cause. Here are some prepositional phrases. Where? Across the street. When? At 2 p.m. How? With dignity. Where again? Near campus. When? Until the end of semester. This last example is actually a double prepositional phrase, until the end of semester. We often use prepositional phrases in combination like this. Our book calls this proliferating prepositional phrases, which I love for its alliteration. Of, to, and I would add in phrases have a tendency to build up. I appeal to the people of Texas on this beautiful day in October. I can just keep going because adverbs give us such flexibility. The problem is sometimes you can end up with really awkward preposition chains that shift your sentence rhythm in a bad way. This happens in particular when your prepositional phrases are at the ends of sentences. Remember, we tend to focus on the ends of things, end focus. When we use the known new contract, we're looking for that new information at the end of the sentence. if I just keep getting more information about where and when, unless the information about where and when is sort of the point, your sentence can leave readers wondering, when is this going to end? Here's a passage that might show up in a course syllabus. Does it have too many prepositional phrases? Have they proliferated out of control? Or is this all information that the audience of students really, really needs? Take a few minutes to look at this and think about what would you keep and what would you take out and what's just filler. There's a big old pile of prepositional phrases going on here. When, at the end of the final class period, on Tuesday. Is this all necessary information? Do we really need to know that the final class period is on Tuesday versus Wednesday? It's still the final class period. As a student, do you want to know that it's going to happen at the end of the final class period versus the beginning? Well, as a teacher, if I say simply during the final class period, I'm going to have students asking me for 50 minutes. Can I skip now? Can I skip now? When are we going to talk about skipping? Because the core sentence here is students may choose to skip the final exam. Now we do have an adjectival prepositional phrase here that's telling me which students. Students with a B or higher. Now this, I'm sorry, is pretty necessary important information. If this is my course syllabus, I'm not saying any students can skip the final exam. It's just students with a B or higher. Do I need the phrase in the course? Or is that sort of understood? What do you think? Personally, as a professor of many years, I would leave in the course in here because I will have students coming and asking, well, I got a B or higher on the first exam. Does that count? I got a B or higher on the last activity on test 3. Does that count? I might even add overall to this. Just because a syllabus is kind of like a contract between an instructor and the students, and you want to be specific. What about this last prepositional phrase? The final exam is on testing metrics and standardization. Is this really necessary, or am I just trying to make my syllabus longer? You might say, I want to know what the final exam is about, so I can make an informed choice about whether or not I want to skip that. But does this information need to go in this sentence? Could it go somewhere else in the syllabus, like with the final exam section? A lot of this is a matter of taste, but a lot of it really depends on your audience and what information those people need. Let's turn to some literature now. Are there too many prepositional phrases here in the opening sentence to Edith Wharton's American modernist novel, The Age of Innocence? Count them up. Strip this sucker down to its core sentence. The core sentence is Christine Nielsen was singing. There are 6 prepositional phrases here. On a January evening, 1. Of the early 70s, 2. In Faust, 3. At the Academy, 4. Of music, 5. In New York, 6. What do you think? Is this too many prepositional phrases? Have things proliferated out of control? Or would you say, well, this is the first sentence of a novel. We need to set the scene. We need to know when and where. Would it make sense just to say Christine Nielsen was singing? Who's she? What is she singing? Sometimes you need a lot of prepositional phrases. And notice how Edith Wharton spreads them around her core sentence. She has 2 in the introduction and then 4, but many of them are short, at the end. Would this sentence work if instead it said Christine Nielsen was singing in Faust at the Academy of Music in New York on a January evening of the early 70s? Maybe. Maybe that's not too many, 6 in a row. Stuff to think about. Here's a longer passage from Sherman Alexie's controversial, frankly, young adult novel, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. It shows up on banned book lists frequently in this century. And as you read through this, you might get an idea of why. I realized that, sure, I was a Spokane Indian. I belonged to that tribe. But I also belonged to the tribe of American immigrants. So we start getting these prepositional phrases. To the tribe of American immigrants. This sets up a pattern. And to the tribe of basketball players. And to the tribe of bookworms. And the tribe of cartoonists. And the tribe of chronic masturbators. And the tribe of teenage boys. And the tribe of small-town kids. And the tribe of Pacific Northwesterners. And the tribe of tortilla chips and salsa lovers. And the tribe of poverty. And the tribe of funeral goers. And the tribe of beloved sons. And the tribe of boys who really missed their best friends. It was a huge realization. And that's when I knew that I was going to be okay. Alexie's novel does have a lot about sex and masturbation. It's narrated by a teenage boy who's pretty upfront and open about what he does in his free time. Are there too many prepositional phrases here? We have of, all over the place. We have and the tribe, and the tribe, and the tribe, and the tribe, all over the place. Is this strategic repetition, or is this redundancy? Is there a rhetorical effect to all of these prepositional phrases, or is someone just trying to increase a word count? Because let's face it, sometimes that's why you use prepositional phrases. If you were teaching this novel in a high school classroom, what would you say to students about it? Because frankly, these are sentence fragments, and they're repetitive. Is that okay? Why this order for these prepositional phrases? Why basketball players and then boys who really miss their best friends? Is that the most important one at the end? This really does summarize a lot of the trauma that our hero has gone through. And as such, it really is sort of taking what we already know and putting it in a new light. Prepositional phrases can help with the known new contract if we put them in the right place in a sentence. So what are the rules of the known new contract once again? Well, you put your old info at the beginning of the sentence and your new info at the end. Then the new info morphs into the old info at the beginning of your next sentence. Sometimes when you end on a prepositional phrase, you screw up the known new contract because your prepositional phrase does not include this all-important new information. It's just icing. Let's look at some examples from exercise 23 on pages 154 to 155. How would you revise this sentence? Never be an investor in something you don't understand or in the dream of an artful salesperson of some product. What's wrong here? Where are the prepositional phrases? Well, we've got in something, in the dream of an artful salesperson of some product. How would you revise this sentence? Never be an investor in something you don't understand, period. Never invest in a salesperson's dream or in something you don't understand. How do you want to end this sentence? What's the most important point? What's the new information? Of some product? I'm sorry, that really just doesn't do it. Here's another example from exercise 23. Plaque is an almost invisible sticky film of bacteria that in the case of all of us continuously forms throughout the day and night. A skilled teacher will look at this sentence and say, word count. Somebody is trying to make the sentences longer, to make them sound more important. In the case of all of us, throughout the day and night, wow, this writer's trying really, really hard. Has this sentence ended on the important new information throughout the day and night? Well, I sure hope not. How would you revise this? You've got dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and thousands, of different choices for what you would do with this sentence. Plaque, which forms continuously, is an almost invisible sticky film of bacteria. Well, that's kind of dramatic. I mean, most of us find bacteria interesting, if not disgusting. What did you come up with? What do you want to emphasize? You could say the almost invisible sticky film of bacteria that forms continuously is called plaque. Maybe you want to emphasize plaque rather than bacteria. Maybe you want to emphasize that it's almost invisible. Maybe you want to emphasize its continuous formation. Choices. Grammar gives us choices. On page 155, our book introduces the idea of noun phrases as adverbials. So does this blow your mind a little bit that a noun can act as an adverb? Wait, these are two of our four form classes. But what does an adverb do? It modifies a verb. Noun phrases can modify verbs. How is this possible? Noun phrases sometimes tell us when or where. That's what adverbs do. When, where, why, how. They're similar to prepositional phrases, but with the prepositions taken off. If you look on page 155 of our book, it shows you sort of the understood or missing preposition in brackets. I studied 5 solid hours yesterday. Well, that really means I studied for 5 solid hours. Now, these noun phrases may look like direct objects because they come directly after a verb. How can you tell the difference? Here's a sentence. I looked 5 times. You might look at this sentence and say, oh, it's a pattern 5 sentence. Subject, verb, direct object. But a direct object answers the question what or who. I looked what? 5 times. Well, that kind of works, but 5 times is really telling me frequency. It's telling me how often. It's telling me when. Let's look at some examples of how we can distinguish a direct object from an adverbial noun. I studied algebra. Is algebra a direct object or a noun acting as an adverb? I studied what? I studied algebra. This answers the what question. Therefore, it's a direct object. This is a pattern 5 sentence. I studied all night. I studied what? All night. Well, unless I'm studying the actual night, this is not a direct object. It's answering the when question, the how long question. This is an adverbial noun phrase. This is a pattern 4 sentence with an optional adverbial. So often you'll see these adverbial nouns giving you information about when or how long. Look at this passage from the fairy tale Cinderella. In translation, the original is French. Look for adverbial nouns. You're also going to see a lot of prepositional phrases, but where is a noun phrase that's acting as an adverbial? In red is our adverbial noun phrase. The next day, the 2 sisters were where? At the ball. This is a pattern 1 sentence in the beginning because we have our subject, our be verb, and our adverbial. How do I know this is an adverbial noun? I can move it. The 2 sisters were at the ball the next day. I could even say the 2 sisters were the next day at the ball. I probably wouldn't, but I can move this noun phrase around, which is, a sort of red flag flare in the air that this is acting as an adverb. The king's son was always where? By her, and never ceased what? His compliments and kind speeches. In green here, we have a direct object. We can't say his compliments and kind speeches, the king's son was always by her. No, it has to stay after the verb. And then I have a prepositional phrase at the end, to her. Are you ever going to have a time in your life where someone walks up to you and says, hey, can you tell me the difference between a prepositional phrase that acts as an adverb and a noun phrase that acts as an adverb? And a direct object, those are nouns too. No, probably not. These concepts, however, are good ways to really see, do you understand what an adverb is and does? Do you understand what a direct object does differently? At the bottom of page 155, our book talks about infinitive verb phrases as adverbials. As you have reviewed several times now, an infinitive verb phrase is one that uses the to form of a verb. To study, to go, to pray, to need. How do they function as adverbials? Well, they answer the question why that the rest of the sentence sort of anticipates. Here's an example. She is afraid. Why? There are a lot of ways I could answer this question, aren't there? I could answer with a dependent clause. I could say because. But I can also use an infinitive verb phrase. She is afraid to take that class. The part of the sentence that is underlined is acting as an adverbial because it's giving me more information about the verb. How do we choose the best infinitive verb phrases? Well, we really want to think about the why. Damien must study harder. Why? To do what? To get an A? To keep his scholarship? To prevent his parents from driving to campus and taking him home in the middle of semester? All infinitive verb phrases. Your turn. Why does Kiara want a better job? Kiara wants a better job to make more money, have better hours, improve her long-term career perspectives, to get away from her ex-boyfriend. The possibilities really are endless. Ms. Jones, why do you require so much homework? To increase test scores, to engage students, to encourage parents to assist in the learning of their children. Infinitive verb phrases can be very short, or they can develop into a rather complex phrase with direct objects, additional prepositional phrases. We went to the party. To do what? To do things you do not tell your parents or teachers about. This might be a fun activity to do with students. How many different to verb patterns can you come up with? The crazier the better. We went to the party to recite Beowulf in Old English, which is always a swell time. I bet none of you came up with that sentence, did you? This allows students to use their creativity, to express themselves, and also to start building more complex sentences. You can use this with first graders. You can definitely use it with fourth graders or 10th graders. You can also use it in your own writing. Have you answered your sentence's unspoken why question? You don't always have to answer it with a because. An infinitive verb phrase can give you some variety. Now, while you're slapping all these infinitive verb phrases on your sentences, because here's a way to get some word count rather than putting on a meaningless prepositional phrase. Sometimes they end up dangling, which is not good. How can an infinitive verb phrase become a dangling modifier? Well, look at this sentence. To improve your grades, good study habits help. This is a variation on a sentence you will find on page 156 of your textbook. Do you understand what's going on here? Yeah, I need to study to have better grades. The problem is, grammatically, this sentence implies that good study habits somehow are like living, breathing things that go out and improve your grades. We're missing the subject of this infinitive phrase. To improve your grades, you need to do something. Here are some revisions. Our original sentence is to improve your grades, good study habits help. This has a dangling infinitive phrase. To improve your grades, you need good study habits. Well, what if I just rearrange this sentence? Good study habits help to improve your grades. Guess what? It's still dangling because I haven't put the subject in there. I'm talking around it. If I'm going to flip the sentence, I still have to put a subject in there. Good study habits help you to improve your grades. You might see this as kind of a picky point. A lot of readers, a lot of teachers won't catch or mark this because they still do understand the point of your sentence. As our book says, it's not a problem of communication. The reader is not likely to misinterpret the meaning. Still, there's, quote, a kind of fuzziness. Just add a subject for your infinitive phrase. The bottom of page 156 gives you 2 helpful rules. Again. And before I send you off to your quiz, given everything we've talked about, everything you've read so far in chapter 8, what needs to happen with this sentence? Does anything need to happen with this sentence? Let's break down what we have here. What do you have at the beginning of the sentence before the comma? To avoid grave future complications. This is one of those infinitive verb phrases. What's the implied subject? Who should avoid grave future complications? Well, people. You. What we get after the comma instead is a history. No. So I have a dangling infinitive phrase, and then I have a pile of proliferating prepositional phrases of a problem with a disease of the heart. Seriously? Why can't this person just say a history of heart disease? Requires avoiding the sort of foods with a high percentage of saturated fat. People with a history of heart disease should avoid foods high in saturated fats to avoid grave future complications. All right, did you hear what I did there? I added a subject. I took out a lot of the prepositional phrases. I moved my infinitive phrase to the end just because I felt like it. And I can keep it at the beginning or put it at the end because I have added the subject. I've said people. What would you do with this? I'm actually going to bring this up in class, this slide. This is where we're going to start and talk about all the different ways we could rewrite this sucker to be clearer, more grammatical, and more powerful on the audience.